So, in some of my other videos, I've briefly gone over some of the things in the last, year and a half that have sort of gone wrong in my life, um, that have contributed to the overall feeling of sort of being stuck, whether it come to my professional life or my fitness journey. Um, and today I wanted to focus on one thing in particular that I think many of us do have in common, and that is the death of my dog. Um, it's something that happened kind of out of the blue. We weren't expecting it, and it is something that hit a lot harder than I really expected something like that to ever hit. I've had dogs, other dogs throughout my life, but they were when I was much younger, and they were at a time where I was a lot less responsible, and my parents ended up rehoming the dogs. So the dog that just recently passed for me was one that I had from, being a puppy all the way till she was almost 13 years old when she passed away. And you don't realize sometimes how big a part of your family your dog becomes until they're no longer there. And she was a big part of our lives. She was important to my wife and I. Um, so I think that I'm kind of in the frame of mind now where I can share a little bit about the story. Um, because I know a lot of people struggle with this when she got sick back in the summertime. I mean, I guess maybe I'll just backtrack a little bit. So my dog, her name was Layla, and she was a Morkie, which is a part Maltese, part Yorkshire Terrier. And she was originally my sister's dog, and my sister got her in 2011. And that was at a time when her and I were living together at my dad's house. We were living in a basement apartment before we both bought our homes. And we kind of raised her together. And then my sister ended up moving out, and so did I. And she kept her for a few years on her own. I would pick up the dog and take her for weekends and whatnot. Whenever my sister would go somewhere, I would watch her because I loved the dog like it was my own. And then around 2015, my sister was pregnant with her first child, and she had moved out to the country and she had started her own business, and it really didn't have the time to dedicate to taking care of a dog properly. So she asked me if, my wife and I'd be willing to take her. Obviously, we wanted to do that. So she immediately fit right in because I had helped raise her with my sister, and it was like she was just always there. A huge part of our lives. She was the sweetest, most kind, caring dog. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. My wife has a hair salon in her house. That's what she does for a living right now. And she would spend most of her work days downstairs with her clients, and every time someone would come over, they were always excited to see her. She was just that kind of dog. We had people all the time say, if you guys ever wanted to go somewhere, I'll be more than happy to watch her. She was very easy to take care of, well trained. She didn't shed. Just really, really wonderful. And her whole life, she's been very healthy. Never really needed to go to the vet. The odd time maybe she got sick because she ate something that she shouldn't have, but you know, that's just what dogs do. Um, and then this past June, my wife was out for dinner one night, and I was home alone. I was upstairs doing laundry, and she was downstairs on the couch hanging out where she normally did. And I heard like this blood curdling scream, something I'd never heard before from her. And I thought maybe she had a habit of sitting up on sort of the back of our couch, like the top part of the couch. So I thought maybe something had happened and maybe she fell asleep and she fell off and hurt herself. So I ran downstairs as fast as I could, and I found her on the couch, and she was sort of like extended outward, like she had stretched herself out and her eyes were rolling in the back of her head, and she was sort of making these slow deep breaths, and I really had no idea what was going on. I just had like this real like sinking feeling in my stomach. So I called my wife, and I said to her, I said, listen, you need to get home. Something's wrong with her. I thought she was dying at the time. And about 15 minutes passed by. My wife ended up getting home and she had returned to normal. And I really didn't know what to think of it. So, my wife's looking at her and said, well, I thought you said there was something wrong with her. You said that she looked like, she was dying. And so I tried to explain everything that had gone on. And she goes, well, she looks completely fine. And she did. She looked like nothing had happened. And I was really confused. I didn't really know what to do. So it was kind of late at night. We were going to take her to the vet in the next morning, right away. So we decided to go to bed. And um, she started panting in her bed. She would sleep in a little bed on the floor beside us. And I could hear her panting and sort of breathing hard. And I thought maybe she was just hot. So I got her some water and kind of put a fan near her so she could cool off. And then around 2:30 in the morning, she woke us up with that same blood curdling scream, and it happened again. This time it was a little bit different, for the next, probably after the episode had happened, for about a minute or so, she kind of looked like she was in a bit of a daze. And we were obviously both concerned. So the vet opened the next morning. I got there at 7 o'clock. And they said, it seems like it could be a seizure. And in dogs her age, if this sort of thing develops, it's usually a bad prognosis. It could be something brain related, sometimes a brain tumor, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. And they found also, they did a heart exam on her. They found a murmur. So in dogs, heart murmurs are graded from 1 to 6, and she was like a 5.5. Whereas about a year and a half prior to that, she was at the vet and she had no heart murmur at all. So that was bad. Um, the vet told us, take her home, monitor her. It might happen again. It might not happen again, but because of her age, something might happen. So we took her home and it repeated again. And things slowly started to get worse. She was very tired and lethargic, and she wasn't herself. She wasn't eating properly. So we took her to the vet. There was a stretch from when this all began in June up until she ended up passing away in October that we probably made 10, 12 trips to the vet between our regular vet and the after hours emergency vet. We're very lucky that we live in a city that has the University of Guelph has a vet college, the Ontario Veterinarian College. So there's a lot of vets in the city, and so we're very lucky for that. They put her on heart medication, and we found out that she was going into congestive heart failure. So they gave her vetmedin, and they gave her something else. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was vetmedin, and it was something else to do for her heart. It'll eventually come to me. So we started on those course of medications, and they also gave her an anti-seizure medication that we had to give in a syringe in her mouth, like 3 times a day, which was difficult to do, just in case it was seizures and not heart related. So things didn't look good when we started her on the medication, and it was probably 4 or 5 days later, after repeated episodes, that we were just so distraught. Like, we didn't know what to do. We thought we were going to have to put her down. We rushed to the emergency vet just in tears, and the stress was horrific. Like, I people who've gone through this with their pets before know what it's like. The stress is awful. Like, your life shuts down. You don't eat properly. I wasn't going to the gym. My wife took time off of work. Your life kind of just shuts down because you're so stressed out. You don't know what to do. You want to spend time with them just in case the worst case scenario happens, right? So we took her to the vet one night, and she had been on her medication for I think 5 or 6 days, and they said, listen, it's a bad idea to put her down now. Give the medication some time. So we said, okay, let's give it some time to really kick in. And it did. A few days later, things started to sort of level out. The episodes stopped happening. Her eating returned to normal. We tried to clean up her diet. We moved her off of dog kibble and put her on a raw diet. Gave her some supplements that help with heart health. CoQ10, MCT oil, anti-inflammatories, whatnot. We put her on an anti-inflammatory diet, basically. And it seemed like things were going well. Like, we were able to take her for walks. The episodes became few and far in between. So there was a stretch where we had, sometimes two a day for like a week straight, to it went from maybe one every 6 weeks. Obviously, that didn't last. Um, we had to monitor her at all times. So, I'm sitting in my office right now, and we bought a large pen for her, and we left a nightlight on, and we would put a camera on her so that we could record any episodes that might happen throughout the night. And come late June, I think, late July, early August, episodes started to slowly creep back in. And they were still infrequent. We would go several weeks without a problem, and then once in a while one would come at night, and it was very stressful. We would record everything, but it got to the point where we found out that she wasn't actually having any brain related seizures. So we were able to take her off the Keppra, is what it was called, for the seizure medication. We took her off of that. Everything was heart related. So she was having fainting episodes or syncope, which is essentially, humans can go through too. Your heart is no longer pumping efficiently, and it basically causes you to pass out. And that's what was happening to her. She wasn't receiving the oxygen to her brain. So we tried to do things like limit her going up and down the stairs, because she would like to, always run up and down the stairs as fast as she could. If the doorbell rang, she would sprint to the door. She'd get excited and bark. We tried to calm those things down so she wouldn't get too excited. And it did work, but eventually the advanced heart murmur took over, right? And it got worse. We planned a trip to Alberta for late September, and the day the day prior to our trip to Alberta, um, I gave her a bath, and that was something that always stressed her out. But you had to give her baths. Like, I had to give her one once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So we tried to develop a bit of a plan, because she would have an episode after a bath where we would fill the bathtub with water first away from her so she didn't hear the water running, and just sort of put her in it and lightly, wash her. And it just didn't work this time. And she had a really bad episode. And this is the day before we were leaving. And she began doing sort of like these stomach heaving, convulsion like, it almost looked like a convulsion with her stomach, like before someone vomits, but she wasn't vomiting. It was more almost respiratory, where she looked like she was having trouble breathing. Um, that was new. We had never seen that before, and we almost canceled our trip. We just really didn't know what to do. The person that we were leaving her with wasn't a vet, but she was a nurse, so she was familiar with, and she had her own dog, and she was familiar with, administering medication and watching out for changes in symptoms and whatnot. She said, "Listen, I'll take care of her. I have the number to your vet. She's in good hands." So we ended up going, and everything was okay. And when we got back from the trip, I picked her up, and it was 2 days after we got home. I took her for a walk around, just around our block, to give her a little bit of exercise. I would never have her run, just a light walk, just to get some movement. And she collapsed on the pavement on me. I saw her legs get wobbly, and she had an episode on the pavement. I picked her up, and I carried her home, and I knew we were in trouble. So I brought her home, put her on the couch, and she was doing that stomach convulsion again, and she soiled herself, which was another new symptom. And I called my wife. She came home, and we we made the decision to go to the vet and ask for their advice. And they suggested that we put her down. Her condition was worsening rapidly, and we ran the risk of having her just drop dead on us. And we promised ourselves that we would never put her in a scenario where we were going to allow her to die like that. We wanted her to die with some dignity. And we had to put our own emotions aside. We weren't going to keep her going for ourselves. That would be selfish, and it would be cruel. And it was a very hard decision to make. I mean, it's only recently that I can talk about something like this without getting extremely overwhelmed with emotion. It's been October. It's been 4 months now, and it's gotten a little bit easier. It's crazy how much you think about them every single day. But I think back to that moment where we had to make the decision to put her down, and we said to the vet, okay, well, let's make the call because we don't want this to happen, but give us 24 hours. And we brought her home. We stayed up till like 2 o'clock in the morning. We just hung out with her, and it was so hard to wrap your head around the fact that you know you're putting your dog to sleep. You're making that decision because in the moment she seems like she's okay, but you know that she's not. And she's been a fixture of your life and your family for 13 years. And it all comes to an end the following morning. And it was just something that I really couldn't wrap my head around. So we drove to the vet the next day, in dead silence. I'll never forget that. And, you know, we took her for a little walk sort of around the property before we brought her in. And we took her in and we said her goodbyes. And that was a tough process. You know, for anybody who's been through it before, or anybody who has a dog and hasn't been through it yet, it is not easy. I wasn't prepared for that. My wife wasn't prepared for it, and I think that I wanted to I wanted to make this video because when when she was sick, I was sort of searching for answers about when is the right time, right? Like, when is the right time to make that decision? It's like it's an impossible decision to make. When you make it, you feel like it was like you start to have this mental war with yourself. Is it the right time? Am I making the right decision? Does she have more time? Am I robbing her of time that she still has? Like, when is the right time? Do I wait? But what if I wait too long and then it's too late and things get worse? I'm gonna hate myself for that, but I'm gonna hate myself for taking it too early. It's just, all I have to say is, looking back on things, take the advice of your vet, but also, your pet, your dog, your cat, whatever it might be, better than anybody else. They kind of tell you when it's time. And I don't know how to explain this, but there was like this look in her eyes. She kind of lost that, almost like that puppy dog look in her eyes, that warm look. And it was almost like this cold look of like, she was crying out for help without saying anything. And we were very in tune with her, how she communicated with us. Like, we understood her and she understood us. And you could just tell it was time. She was ready. I remember sitting in my basement, the day before, and she was sitting out on my deck in the sunshine. And she was just kind of like sitting there staring up at the sky. And you just knew it was time. And I knew that if I didn't do it and something bad had happened to her, I'd never forgive myself. So it's better to be, you know, it's better to be 3 weeks early than a day late when it comes to something like this. Do it for them. Do what's right. Do what's humane. You know, do it out of love. It's it's a hard decision to make, but you have to find the strength to do it. So, we put her down, and my wife and I spent the rest of the day kind of almost in silence. We went for a walk on a forest path afterwards, kind of like it was like a very numb feeling, shell shock. And yeah, that's sort of how it ended. And I've actually, if you look right here, you can see this pink bandana sitting on my guitar. Her groomer, um, every time I take her for an appointment, she would put a bandana on her, a different one every time, and then she'd print her name, on the bandana. And we have like 5 or 6 of them still kicking around. So I have it there, so that I always remind myself of her. I mean, I haven't ever forgotten about her, and I really won't. Like, we think about her multiple times a day. We have another dog now, which is something that I'll get into in another video. But I really wanted to make this because I think a lot of people are searching for, how do you know it's the right time? How do you make that decision? How do you make that call? Just really all I can say is listen to your gut, listen to your pet. You know when it's time. Don't be selfish. Don't keep them around just for you, because you could be doing, you're doing them a disservice. You're doing yourself a disservice. You don't want to regret anything. Just do the right thing. If you know it's time and you get that vibe, you have to have the bravery to do it. And I promise you, as time goes on, it gets better. You know, you don't ever stop missing them, but the pain and the shock of them no longer being there, it does begin to subside. You'll have your moments, they'll come and go, but that's just, I had read once that people grieve the loss of their pets sometimes more than the loss of certain human companions, friends, or family, or whatnot. They almost grieve with them on the level as if they lost a child or a parent. And I understand that because it was tough. And it was really tough. I couldn't imagine grieving really more than that. I'm sure it is possible, But anyway, I hope this video helps. I hope it offers, some sort of hope for people who are dealing with a sick pet and sort of getting to that stage where they might have to make that decision to put their pet down. Yeah. And I think in another video at another time, I'll talk about my new dog, because it was a very sort of strange situation how this came about. And, it's really helped with the healing process. Neither of us wanted a dog this soon, but it fell into our lap in a specific way, that I'll talk about. But yeah, I just wanted to share this stuff about the pet that I lost, and I hope in some way that this can help anybody. Anyways, thanks a lot, guys. Until next time.